By the way, we can be streaming for up to 8 hours, so we've got
Ooh,
some time, right?
good thing you just gave us a 45-minute cutoff.
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, hello, everyone out there in podcast land and in YouTube, whatever channel you're watching this from. This is the Front Row Movie Reviews, the podcast for people who actually like movies. And we're here to talk about a special kind of movie today. This is Netflix's largest release to date. We've done the research. It's their largest budget to date. And it's also been getting quite a split reaction amongst whether you be a critic or the audience score when you're looking at things like Rotten Tomatoes. We are talking about the Max Landis written, the David Ayers directed, the Will Smith and Joel Edgerton starred Bright that just was released on Netflix. And with me today, I've got two returning guests, so we don't have to talk about favorite movies. I've got Bryan from After the Hype. How are you, man?
I'm doing wonderful. And you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. You know, it's probably not as... What's the temperature out in California right now?
Balmy.
Balmy. So go ahead and give me a number, though.
I don't have a number. When I went to bed, it was 50 degrees. I think it's in the 70s or 80s today.
It is like 9 degrees outside right now.
I mean, I left Wisconsin yesterday, and it was -4 when I left. So I know cold. I just left it.
So we started talking about a different Netflix movie, and I was like, I haven't heard of that. And Bryan goes, oh, well, there's posters. There's stuff all over billboards around town here. And he goes, I guess Springfield and LA are a little different, which was the understatement of 2017.
Oh, yeah.
But Bryan, talk to me about After the Hype. How's it going?
It's going good. We're taking a week off right now to all kind of like calm down from the holidays, but it's going good. We just we did our Secret Santa battle that just came out about 2 weeks ago. Then we just did our New Year's episode, which came out yesterday, and that was on Ghostbusters 2 because I wanted to do a movie that took place at New Year's, and most movies that take place at New Year's suck. And this one was pretty good, and we were kind of hot and cold on it. Like, we like the good stuff, we hate the bad stuff, and there's a lot of both in Ghostbusters 2. But it's a really good episode. You guys should check it out. And then we still have our Spotify playlists, which are getting more and more popular. They come out every Friday, and they're usually themed to something going on that week, either a movie release or like a movie anniversary, or we did like Christmas themes. But we have them. They come out every week. You subscribe to one playlist, and then you get it updated every single Friday, and it's a lot of fun. The one that came out this week was New Year's. And then next week, Chewy is in the other room deciding it right now, and we'll have that one up
That's
soon.
fantastic. You know, you guys, you're so interactive, too, on all social media platforms.
We try.
Your website as well, athpod.com. So
Yeah,
I definitely recommend that everyone go check out After the Hype, because they look at a movie about 6 months or so after it comes out. And
yeah, anytime
really,
it hits Blu-ray, we'll talk about it.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because what that does is it gives you a little bit of space. Like, if a movie is slightly controversial, no movie that came out recently is at all controversial. People aren't divided on any particular Star Wars movie at all. So it'll be nice to hear maybe a few months down the road, kind of, you almost get to relive that experience of seeing that movie again. I really appreciate you guys, and love having you on again. This is like third or fourth time, so it's nice to see you again.
Yeah, it's good. I'm looking forward to talking about Star Wars because there's a lot of anger with that right now, both on like positive and negative. Like, people who really love it are really mad at the people who hate it, and likewise, it'll be an interesting episode. Look forward to it in like June.
Absolutely. And then maybe it will actually be like 70 degrees here.
Yeah, and then it'll be 120 here.
Okay, fair enough. Our second guest returning, he's been on the Veterans Day specials. He's been on the Memorial Day special. We finally roped him into a non-war type movie, although it's still an action movie. But Jay, how are you?
I'm doing well. Kind of tired from all the holidays. Got 2 little ones, so we got 50,000 pounds of toys running around the house.
Right. We usually try to keep it pretty tidy here, and Liam is off school this week, so it's been me and him, and the house isn't looking as tidy as it normally does. Although you can see we still have some of our Christmas decorations up. So.
Oh yeah, goes till New Year's.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, it'll go towards the Epiphany for us because it's like, you know, the Catholic thing. So anyway. Nice to have you on again, sir. And we're going to jump right into sort of the controversy for this movie. Actually, Jay was the one that said maybe we ought to do a full disclosure on this particular film because the Rotten Tomatoes score and the audience score is considerably different. So I did pull that up, and it looks like as of right now, Rotten Tomatoes has it at 29%, and the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is 88%. I think the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle of that. And of course, it's hard to base a movie entirely off of the Rotten Tomatoes score because all that does is grab a whole bunch of different reviews that might be using a different set of criteria. It might be using a completely different rating system and tries to make this amalgamation of a score. And sometimes I think that maybe we almost put too much emphasis on the Rotten Tomatoes score. I know that I do. I fall into that trap quite a bit. But Bryan, what's your opinion on the whole Rotten Tomatoes thing, the phenomenon that it is, especially being closer to the industry out there?
I'll watch my words a little bit because I have a good friend who works for Rotten Tomatoes, and he's a good dude. But I kind of hate the whole Rotten Tomatoes, Metacritic, everything thing. Like I think it's feeding into a larger nature of just everything is either the greatest movie in the world or the worst, and that's the worst way to look at movies because it's a shade of gray. Like it's kind of sad to watch this start happening. But out here, people are kind of the same as they would be there. Like it's just people, they see the number and that dictates whether or not they'll see the movie. And I think that's the wrong way to go about it, but it is more and more becoming the norm, to somewhat answer your question.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No, I think that if you look at a movie black and white like that, then your interest in seeing that film drops considerably. So when this movie was first announced, even a while ago, I was really kind of interested in it. I like David Ayer. We just talked about Fury on the last Veterans Day special, so this is Jay's second shot at David Ayer. And you know, I enjoy Will Smith. As much as I should hate him for his family and his antics, I really do enjoy him. So I was looking forward to this movie. I saw that it was getting lambasted on Rotten Tomatoes, and that made me a little less interested to see it. I'm glad that we decided to do this episode because that put me in the mood to go out and watch it again. And we'll talk about it in our first impressions here in a bit, but I ended up really enjoying this movie for the most part. There's obviously some flaws, much like there are in any movie, but if I'm just looking at it as this is a 29% on Rotten Tomatoes, if you're looking at a grade standpoint, that's a massive failure. And I don't see this movie as a massive failure by any stretch of the imagination. Is it the next, am I going to put it in my top 10? No. But not many movies. I mean, that's only 10 movies that you're going to love and watch over and over again. If you subscribe to this idea that everything has to be the best picture nominee or best movie ever made, I think you're going to be disappointed quite a bit. So I really do agree with you there, Bryan. Jay, what are your thoughts about this whole discrepancy between the Rotten Tomatoes score, maybe some of the critical response to this film versus what your thoughts were on watching it?
I'm in the same boat as you I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a very fun movie. Not a top tenner for me, for sure, but I actually think it had some pretty good rewatchability in it because they did some world building and things like that. But when it comes to the difference between that and Rotten Tomatoes, I feel like maybe the last year is where we started seeing this issue of backlash, I guess you'd call it, against Rotten Tomatoes. And I feel like just as a whole, not to get all political, but this country, the narrative is I'm right, you're wrong. And now I feel like it's moving into the movie world, which is crazy. But like you guys said, I think with movies, it depends on my mood, what kind of movie I want to watch. It depends on the time of year, what kind of movie I want to watch. And to think that everything has to be perfect and fit into this best movie ever narrative is pretty ridiculous. So I'm starting to see, I always check Rotten Tomatoes, but I'm starting to get away from caring what it shows. And even if it has a bad review, if it's something I want to see, I'm going to go see it and make my determination. But lately I've also been swayed away a little bit with certain movies. You know, it makes me a little more hesitant, but then I usually go and see it anyways.
And if you listen to our Last Jedi review, I was completely conflicted of that movie, and I think the further I get away from it, the more I enjoy it. But one of the things that got me, I didn't look at any of the spoilers. I tried not to read the reviews, but I looked at the bottom line of IGN and a couple of others, and they said it was the best since Empire. So I went in there thinking it was going to be the best since Empire. Some people might think it was. I did not. So it's one of those things where you really got to be careful when looking at who's reviewing and everything like that. Now, before we jump actually into discussion of the movie, and that's going to be a full spoiler discussion, so make sure you go and watch Bright. It's on Netflix right now. You could pause us and go watch it for the next 2 hours, then come back and hear us discuss all about elves and orcs, because yes, there are elves and orcs in this movie.
And a dragon. There's a dragon.
And a dragon. Awesome. I did see the dragon. And there's also a chick that's like disembodied, and you don't. Anyway, we'll get into it. But before we do, let's talk a little bit about Netflix, because they are trying to become a major player in Hollywood. And on the TV side of things, they are already starting to stack up all the awards. Untold number of Golden Globe nominations for their shows. Obviously, House of Cards is going through a little bit of their problems, but those shows like House of Cards, Orange is the New Black, now they own Black Mirror. These are shows that have really helped explode that content area, original content area of Netflix. And now they're trying to get into movies. This budget was $90 million, so that's nothing to scoff at. And it also follows a movie that was at a $50 million mark. We mentioned it. How do you actually pronounce that movie, Brian? I don't want to.
Oh, Okja.
Okja, okay. And then also War Machine, which was produced by Brad Pitt, and I believe starred Brad Pitt as well, was at $60 million. So they're really trying to get into this game. A lot of their movies are also being released, very limited release in theaters. The reason why they're doing that is because the Academy requires it to play for at least a week in either LA or in New York in order to be qualified for any of those nominations. To date, they've been shut out of the Academy Awards, but I want to get your thoughts on where the future might be for Netflix moving forward, especially with things like the Disney streaming service that's coming on, kind of taking some of that non-original content off of Netflix. Are they going to have to continually do these types of investments in their own pictures? And we'll start with Jay on this one and then move over to Brian.
I think Netflix doesn't have too much to worry about. I don't think they've hit a super home run as far as their movies go. I think they're being very daring in what they're doing. Much more daring, I think, than the big studios have been. Seems like studios want they want to do that expanded universe thing. You know, Marvel's tearing it up. They're doing Star Wars. They're doing sequels, and I think Netflix is doing what I've said hasn't been done for a while, and just trying to think outside of the box. I'm a huge fan of the late 70s through the 80s movies, and I look at those movies, and sometimes I'm like, that could never be made. That could never be made nowadays. Christmas just passed, so I think Gremlins. Could you imagine a Gremlins movie being made now? I could not. I could see Netflix going that route. So I think in a couple of years is where I think their movies are really going to take off, but they're stacking the big names. Brad Pitt, Will Smith, big name I don't want to say, but Adam Sandler. They're getting the big names, and I think before long we're going to start seeing some really, really amazing content out of them. And I don't think their TV stuff started right out the gate as home runs, but now their content's just phenomenal.
Yeah, for sure, Brian.
Well, Netflix is an interesting point because it doesn't need to worry about box office results. Right. So a lot of movies are metered on success on how much they made. Netflix doesn't give a shit. They can do whatever they want, and as long as people watch it, they did well. And people are more prone to watching things if they don't have to pay $30 or $40 or $50, depending on where you live, to go see them in theaters. So Bright might not be a very well-reviewed movie, but it's going to do great because people don't have to worry about. They feel like they already own it because it's just in their library. Right. So with that, it's kind of interesting because they have no real need to go out and make Academy Award worthy films. They can just make things they think people want to watch. They want to watch an orc and elf cop drama sort of thing. They can make that. They want to make how many Adam Sandler movies that are just going to suck up the airways? They can make that. Like, they can do whatever they want, and people will watch it. So as much as I hope that they'll start making those really great movies, they have no need to. They can just make movies they think people want to sit at home and watch and chill out and enjoy, and not worry whether or not it's going to win an Academy Award or all the awards. They can do whatever they want. It's a really kind of cool place for them to be in, and they can take those risks like the Gremlins if they wanted to, or really anything they could think of.
Do you think this is a threat at all to the major studios? Not just Netflix, but we're also talking Amazon producing their original content. They've kind of started with the TV shows as well, and maybe they will go over to movies. Hulu.
Well, they are going to movies. Their movies are remarkably way better than Netflix's. Like,
okay, I haven't
better.
even watched. I haven't even watched any of. Well, you know what? The Big Sick was Amazon movie, wasn't it?
Big Sick, The Handmaiden from last year was phenomenal. Like, they make some good movies.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So what kind of a threat do you see to the major studios with this?
I mean, who knows with the major studios right now? Like, that system's so in flux with Disney buying Fox and Paramount's not doing great. And Warner Brothers is doing worse than it's ever been. Like, the major studios in trouble regardless of whether or not Netflix is making movies. It's just people aren't going to movies as much. And it could be because of Netflix, or it could be because there's just not things they want to see in theaters right now. Mm-hmm. So if there's no good movies in theaters and the best they have is Bright at home, and I enjoyed Bright, but it's not a great movie, as you both said. It's just an enjoyable movie. It's like, I don't think it's necessarily a threat. It's just another option. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Awesome. Well, let's dive right into Bright. Again, this is going to be spoiler heavy, so if you haven't seen it, go see it, because more than likely you have Netflix. So go watch it. This is the easiest movie to watch, like Bryan said. It is worth a watch, I think. It's enjoyable, and we'll go ahead and start our spoilers now. I think this is the Will Smithiest Will Smith has been in a long time.
I disagree. Really?
Yeah. Well, as far as that,
he's such a dick.
Well, he's a super dick, but at the same time, he's just the stuff that he's said, like nasty ass titty bar gunfight. Go. Like, that line is so Will Smith to me. And he's got a lot of quips in this movie that are just spot on. Those types of almost returning to Independence Day is what I would think. But as far as the character goes, yeah, he's not likable. It's written that way. Because the whole time you're really supposed to be, in my mind, rooting for Jacoby, and Will Smith is trying to get away from him the whole time. Daryl Ward, I should say, is his name, which is interesting because I don't think you really heard his first name until the end of the film, and I think that gives you a little bit more impact when Jacoby's going through the burning building and screaming out Daryl instead of, he's called him Ward the whole time. So I really enjoyed that. So let's start with Will Smith. And Bryan, we'll go ahead and start with your thoughts on how his character was portrayed and how he did in this movie.
I mean, his character is just an asshole, like the whole way through, like just unlikable asshole. And like, I kept like waiting for like that Will Smith charm to kick in. I'm like, nah, he's the hero of the movie. And nah, it doesn't really ever come. Like, he's just kind of unlikable prick all the way to the ending. Like, it's a joke, sure, but he's like, yeah, we're still not friends. It's like, come on, man. Like, how would you not want to be friends with Jacoby? He's such a cool guy, and you're just being a dick. But there's something, I think David Ayer really likes making Will Smith an asshole. Like, he's now done it twice in a row.
That's true.
He does a good job with it. I think Will Smith did a great job with the character they gave him. I wish there was just, like, they made the comment at one point, like, Margaret Cho goes, nobody wants to ride in a car with you. And I'm like, he's Will Smith. How can nobody want to ride in a car with him? And then as the movie went, it's like, oh, because he sucks.
Totally. Jay?
Well, I did think he was a dick, but I don't know. I'm with you. I felt he was very blockbuster Will Smith. Still just an anti-hero version of, I think, some old school Will Smith that made lots and lots of monies in the theater. So I liked his character. I thought he had a good arc. But I'm tired of Will Smith doing accents, so I liked it.
So because he could talk normal.
Yeah.
You liked it.
He spits out one-liners better than about anybody.
Yeah, his timing is good, and I think that's what I meant when a return to blockbuster Will Smith is he's not trying to win a Best Actor nomination with this movie by any means. So,
No.
I enjoyed him quite a bit in this film. I liked the growth that he had as a character because at the end, he was willing to sacrifice himself. He was willing to pick up the wand with his bare hand. And of course, as the title suggests, again, spoilers, but Will Smith is a bright, which apparently a bright is someone that can handle magic and be able to handle a magic wand. Whereas earlier in the film, somebody else, one of the thugs, picked up the magic wand with his bare hand, and he basically like disapparated or like disappeared and exploded. So I guess that's what Will Smith was able to craft that character where he was very unlikable, but towards the end I kind of got it, and it did ring true to a lot of those cop movies like End of Watch or Training Day, where it's sort of this anti-hero character that you don't really particularly care for, but you want to see him succeed. And that's how I felt about Will Smith moving towards this film.
I think even earlier in the movie you find out he has a line, he has his principles, and that's when when they corner him and tell him they're going to kill Jacoby, and then he kills them. He clearly drew the line, and he has a limit to how big of a dick he's going to be. And I don't know, kind of a typical anti-hero fashion. You see where he stands.
But I felt like that line was there the whole time. Like it didn't really feel like growth to me. Like he didn't want to do anything illegal to get Jacoby out. He just wanted him out of his car. Just like a polite request to his commanding officer. So he was never like, I don't want to say it wasn't growth, but it just kind of felt like he was never really that bad of a guy. He was just an asshole. Well, yeah, throughout the whole movie, he was still an asshole. He was just a good cop who was an asshole.
His first call was to his wife to tell her to get out, once he knew stuff was going south. So worried about the family the whole time. And I do think that there's a bit of, at the beginning, he didn't care about the elf that they were traveling with. And by the end, he's willing to sacrifice and save her. I think that's more of the growth I'm coming with. I don't know that at the beginning of the film, I don't think he would have done that. And so I think there's a bit of a progression. And this all takes place in one night. One of the things I wanted to mention towards the top is that this movie plugs you in and doesn't give you any sense of what's going on. It really doesn't give you a lot of backstory. There's the dumb agent that follows around the elf agent, and I'm blanking on his name right now. And he fills in the plot for you some of the way. Like one time he actually, his line is like, I just need you to unpack this for me, which basically to me is like a terribly written line to say, audience, pay attention. But this movie, it puts you into this atmosphere where you're in LA, but there's a bunch of orcs running around. You keep hearing about this battle that was 2,000 years ago with the Dark One or Dark Lord. And there's elves that live in a rich area because of whatever. Like this whole film, Jay, you talked a little bit about world building, but I would say that wasn't the purpose of this film. It was more just a day in the life of these two that kind of goes awry. I guess over time you get bits and pieces, but if I had one thing I really enjoyed about the movie is that it didn't treat the audience like we were stupid. Like it didn't have the narration at the beginning or some kind of cards at the beginning telling you what the backstory is. We just got dropped into this world, and I kind of enjoyed that.
Yeah, and maybe what I meant by world building was more they give you enough hints that you really, really want to know about this world. Like I really wanted to know more, and the story worked not doing that. But and we talked about Netflix and TV shows. This to me would have been a much better, more interesting TV show.
Well, it could be interesting if they decide, if this is very successful, which who knows, like Bryan said, only Netflix will know if this is really successful because they don't have to release their numbers. But if maybe we see a prequel where the Battle of the Orcs happened 2,000 years ago, or something like that, that kind of fills in some of that backstory for us. Bryan, what did you feel about kind of just being dropped into this movie?
I mean, that's a very Max Landis thing to do. Like, that's kind of how he does most of his scripts. Like, if you ever watched Dirk Gently on BBC, which if you haven't, you should. It's really, really good.
Okay.
But I mean, say what you will about Max Landis as a person, he kind of seems like a scumbag the more and more stuff is coming out about him. But his screenwriting is very good. Like, he does a great job of showing and not telling, because that's what he wants to see in movies, and I can agree with that. So I like the idea of just like, here's this crazy world, and you just have to deal with it as the movie's going on, because it makes it more real. Like, if they spent the whole time going, holy shit, an orc, then it would be it wouldn't work. Like, it would just be like, dude, these pesky orcs around here. It's just, if it's not normal, then it doesn't work as a movie. And by normalizing the whole thing and not having these weird intros and all that crazy bullshit, it makes the movie work.
Yeah, you kind of build a little bit over time. You get enough information that you're not overwhelmed by the backstory that you're focusing on, particularly like the prophecies with Jacoby and stuff like that come up. You they don't beat that over the head, or the whole thing that he's unblooded, which I do want to get into that, because that's one of my major gripes about this film is if it does anything, it beats you the hell over the head with race politics. But we'll get into that, I'm sure.
It wasn't subtle?
No. It was so subtle. But I like that it didn't necessarily fill in all the blanks for us. It let us go along with the story, and I did enjoy that. I wanted to make sure I mentioned that sort of towards the top. Let's talk about Nick Jacoby, though. Joel Edgerton. Is there a more likable orc out there? I don't know. Jay?
I love Joel Edgerton. I love him. Like, he's one of my favorite actors out there. Like, he's just fantastic, and he just disappears in like every one of his roles, so you don't know it's him. Like, he just does such a good job. And you're right, he made this orc the most likable dude in the entire world. And it's like, I'd be in a car with him. Why do people hate him so much? He's just a cool guy.
He just wanted to be a cop his whole life because he wants to save people, like stuff like that. And just everybody's ragging on him, and he just deals with it the whole film. So I really enjoyed his character quite a bit. Jay?
Well, he is the Jackie Robinson of orcs, right? Trying to be the...
That's right. Number 42.
I agree. Joel Edgerton and everything is just he's solid, and that's another thing with those reviews coming out. Knowing that he was in it is something that pushed me over the edge to definitely want to watch it. And I liked. He's just super nerdy too, and he has an innocence about him. And compared to all the other orcs you meet, he's definitely the most likable.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, and again, he's this unblooded orc, which they really don't go into, but he also doesn't have the orc teeth or orc fangs, which are obviously noticeable towards the top of the film. But he's kind of a man on his own island because he's the first police officer. Every orc thinks that he's a traitor to the blood, to like this goes back. I mean, they have completely exiled him, and then you see his interaction with the humans, and particularly in that locker room scene at the very beginning where all the other cops are just ragging on him, and ragging on Will Smith for being his partner. And the whole time, because Will Smith is a dick in this movie, he's like, hey, I don't have any control of that. I can't help that he's in my car. But he really does help you feel for him. And when he gets killed for all of 6 seconds, you kind of feel it, and then he becomes Jesus orc. So, which we probably should also talk about. How did you feel about that turn, that the prophecy, the orc prophecy that the chosen one would come in 2000 some amount of years, and it happens to be Nick Jacoby? It was a little on the nose for you there?
I'll be honest with you. I know the orcs kept saying it, but the way it was filmed, to me, it just seemed like happenstance that it happened. And then they said, oh, see the prophecy. So I'm sure maybe that's not what was intended. Maybe it was supposed to be on the nose. But to me, it just seemed like a thing that happened. And then they made that connection on there. The other orcs made that connection that he was, as you said, Jesus orc.
I think Tika is the one that really she's the one that brings him back to life with the wand. So I mean, it's not as if he fell into that pit and then hung out for 3 days and then walked out. You know, he basically was brought back to life almost immediately, and apparently felt great afterwards too.
And it seemed like if anybody could control the wand, they could have brought him back. The way, like I said, the way it was filmed, it seemed like anybody could control it could have done that.
I guess but it did really F her up. I mean, like, you looked at her skin was like, it was kind of like, you know, it was a bit hard to look at her because she had those big black bulging veins or whatever all over the place after it was done. But I want to go into her next, but anything else on Nick Jacoby on Joel Edgerton? Bryan?
No, I kind of like the Jesus orc thing, because I like the idea that they didn't realize till after he came back that they're living a prophecy. So like I kind of like that. Yeah, it could just be kind of happenstance that they were just there and it was like victim of circumstance. But at the same time, I kind of like the whole like, oh shit, no, this is all actually happening for a reason. Like it sucks and we're having a terrible night, but I think we're supposed to be. And I thought that's kind of a cool turn. And I thought Joel Edgerton really sold that whole like almost like lost child feel to it. Like, oh shit, where am I? And it was kind of, I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty cool.
I like, you can tell their chemistry between Will Smith and Joel Edgerton, especially when that last scene where they're laying on top of each other out of the building is burning behind them, and then the orcs cut themselves, or like the head orc of the gang of orcs cuts himself. And apparently that's the blooding that needed to happen to invite Jacoby in. How like all the other orcs know that this happened, beyond me. But
text messages.
Text messages, that's right.
Oh shit, it happened.
But so what I liked about that was the banter back and forth. Like the whole time he's, you know, because Will Smith's like, oh, you think you're a big shot now that you're blooded? You know, like I enjoyed that back and forth, and I thought that they had a good chemistry throughout the whole film, which is what helped propel this film from being a garbage film to an enjoyable film. We've all said that it's not gonna win anything, and it's not setting out to win anything. It's a movie that it gives you kind of a cool world to explore, and then you get to have fun for a couple hours and set it aside, maybe to be revisited, maybe to never be seen again. Kind of up to you because it's on Netflix. So let's talk about some of the tertiary characters, the supporting characters. And in particular, I want to talk about Lucy Fry. Is it Tika? Tika? How did you pronounce that?
Tika,
right?
I think.
Yeah, okay.
I think Tika.
I enjoyed her performance. She was zany enough and crazy enough to kind of pull off this whole twisted elf that you really didn't know kind of what her deal was until you found out later that I guess she was really integral in trying to bring back the Dark Lord. And you didn't really necessarily get that through her performance, which I liked. There's a lot of little mysteries that became unraveled, little turns that happened throughout the film. Nothing earth-shattering, but I enjoyed that performance. Bryan, we'll go to you first.
I wasn't a big fan of Lucy Fry in this, and I don't really blame her. I think she did a good job with what they gave her, but I think what they gave her was kind of a shitty character. Like they I'm forgetting the word. They made her a baby essentially. Like she was so infanta. I can't pronounce the word, but they made her an infant. Thank you, infantile. Thank you. That's what I was thinking of. And it was so awkward. Like you could tell like she's supposed to be kind of like this almost hot chick sort of like crazy elf thing, but at the same time she's like almost like gaga goo goo at times. Like she's crazy shit's going on. She's like, ooh, pretty thing on a wall. It's like, what? Like you're supposed to be this badass magic user, but at the same time she's just like a baby. And it didn't really, it felt like you have a pretty decent actress. I haven't seen her in a lot, but I think she's pretty good. And you have a really good screenwriter, but instead of doing something kind of like new and interesting with her, they just kind of made her a prop. And although Lucy Fry did what she could with it, she was just a thing, and it just didn't feel right. Like it felt like every other character had like motivations and things they wanted to do, and she just kind of wanted to protect the wand, and
you didn't really understand why. Yeah, I mean, I get what
work.
you're saying there.
Yeah,
she had a very Fifth Element vibe about her, like Lilu.
But I think Lilu was done way better because that was almost just a language barrier, and this one didn't feel like that.
Yeah, but it made sense in that movie, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It didn't make sense in this movie.
Mm-hmm. What else about her performance, Jay?
Well, I agree with what he said. I think the elves in general, I just don't think any of them were given very much. I did some of the even the I don't know, evil elves, and then the detective elf. I can't remember any of their names because they were so memorable.
Right. Uh-huh.
But they felt at one time they felt very Lord of the Ringsy, very noble, above it all, but really no character to it. I didn't feel like any of the elves were really given much to I don't know, to sing home about. I thought they were all kind of bland characters.
If there was one performance I really didn't enjoy in this film, it was the detective elf, which honestly I can't even bring up. What was that elf's name?
Fancy McSoftface.
I don't even know who the actor is because I don't know what the name was. I'm guessing it's Alex Mraz as Seraphim. Was Seraphim the name of the?
Seraphim was an angel. He was the crazy guy.
It was
Oh, you're right.
Edgar Ramirez was the actor. I looked it up.
All right, Edgar Ramirez. Well, I just didn't like what they gave him. His character was, I don't know, like talk about an unlikable character. It doesn't give you anything to hang on to there that makes him remotely really memorable and at all likable that you care about what he's doing. You don't really know if like the magic fed people are evil and they're out to do bad, or if they're going to help save the world. Like, and he doesn't give you anything there. And I don't know if it's the writing or if that was his portrayal and his acting of it, but I didn't care for him at all. And there was even the one scene that the camera, the way it was lit around him, was like trying just to focus on his eyes, which I guess is sort of a cool effect. But it was super like, it looked like a cinematic scene right out of World of Warcraft, and I didn't like that at all. So I don't particularly care for his performance much in this film. Do you guys agree with me, or am I an idiot?
No, I thought the way all the actors for that whatever the agency, the Magic Investigation Bureau or whatever the hell they were called, I couldn't tell if they were. I kept feeling like they were evil and part of the process of trying to bring back the Dark Lord. I don't think they were, but I think the way they were portrayed, they seemed almost like an evil entity themselves, and it kind of threw things off for me.
And maybe that's because they wanted that turn at the end of like, but like, why have this third party that is like kind of questionable? I don't know. It just didn't seem to fit into the story much for me.
Yeah, and oddly enough, I kind of felt like they were that world's Men in Black in a way, where they were this mystery agency. Sorry to interrupt you.
Maybe Will Smith will join them. This is a prequel. This is a prequel. Bryan.
No, I was going to say, I mostly agree with you. Like, I don't think anybody in the movie did a particularly bad job. I just don't think the script serviced a lot of them. Like, I think a lot of them did the best they could with what they had. And I think this guy's kind of a victim of that, too. Because I feel like he was actually trying to, like, chew on something. Like, he was trying to do something with his character. There was just nothing there.
Do you think, though, that, like, you take this job and it's a movie about an orc cop and an elf bad guy, and it's on Netflix, do you think you bring your A game?
When you have Will Smith as the lead and David Ayer, yeah, I think you would.
That's true. You're right. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. What other characters? I guess we ought to talk about Layla, right? As the
Naomi Rapist?
Yes. As the evil elf supreme here. What do you feel about her menacing performance? I think that my opinion of her is that, again, the script didn't service her well because she was just this menacing force, much like a lot of these villains are in comic booky type of movies where they don't really get much. You look at many of the MCU villains, they're not given much. You look at
Manny, you're being kind.
You look at any of the DC. You look at any of the DC movies; they're not really given much, especially Doomsday. But we'll move on. What do you feel about this particular villain? We'll start with Bryan.
You just couldn't help yourself and get a Batman v Superman dig in while I'm on. I appreciate that. I thought she was fine. Like she was just the bad guy who would show up and fuck shit up, and that was kind of
be a bad guy.
Yeah, but it was like if you've ever enjoyed, say, a Marvel or DC movie and went, the villain was okay, but the movie was cool, you'd be right with everybody on this one.
Yeah.
She looked cool. She was definitely menacing. When she showed up, she was a force to be reckoned with, and all that was cool, but she had no motivation. Oh, I'm here because I pray to a glowing pool. What?
Yeah.
It's just like, okay.
And
I guess I'll watch the rest of this.
Maybe that would have been better served if we had a little bit of that backstory, but I don't know.
It's called the Lazarus Pit. It's in Batman. It's been around for a long time.
Yeah. Jay?
Yeah, I agree. I think I did think it was awesome when like her and her cronies were just like you said, going in and fucking everybody up. That was awesome. I thought it was cool and menacing, but just like as characters, they were there.
Yeah, I get that. Let's talk about, are there any particular scenes you want to highlight, how they were shot, how they were written, anything that you enjoyed? I thought some of the fight choreography was interesting. I didn't think it was, the problem is Netflix has delivered some awesome fight choreography. I mean, look at any of the Daredevil seasons. Look at
Iron Fist?
Not Iron Fist. Definitely not Iron Fist. But I'm just thinking of like the hallway scene in season 1 of Daredevil, the elevator scene in season 2 of Daredevil. I guess really I'm just talking about Daredevil. But the fight choreography in this was pretty cool at times, but I didn't touch that. So there wasn't anything that was overly memorable from those scenes for me, but I did, every scene that was in the car was just Joel Edgerton and Will Smith just talking back and forth. That was what I enjoyed the most in the movie. And I think it's just because of the chemistry that shone through, and you're kind of picking up little pieces of the story as we go along, with Will Smith constantly asking Jacoby, you got to tell me the truth here. What's the truth here? When at first you don't even know what he's referring to. And he's referring to the incident that got him shot. And that's the incident that he was returning from at the beginning of the film. So I liked every one of those scenes, probably more than anything else in the movie. But do you guys have anything particularly that you want to highlight?
My best scene was, sorry, I'm going to totally step on you. I apologize.
No, you're good.
My favorite scene was when Jacoby told him why he let the guy go. I thought that was awesome. I thought it was perfectly motivated. It spoke a lot about like current day police like climate. But it made sense and it totally worked. He knew he had the wrong guy, and if he had just arrested him for tagging, he would have been shot for shooting Will Smith. And I thought that was like a really kind of cool moment in the way it like unfolded. Is like, yeah, it totally makes sense, and he was in the right and he did the right thing. And I thought that was really interesting, and it spoke a lot about his character and how he doesn't trust Will Smith, and Will Smith was taking his trust for granted while not trusting him. And I thought that was kind of a good way to show, no, we're both at the same page. I'm just trying to work with you, and you're still an asshole.
For sure.
But otherwise, that was far and away, I thought, the strongest scene of the whole movie. I liked the angel killing all the SWAT scene. That was really cool, but not as impactful as that one scene.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you. I really enjoyed that as well. Jay?
Mine are, I like the scenes mentioned, but two brief moments, one funny and one I thought powerful. One was just when they get in that shootout and the banter between the two. And I can't remember what Jacoby says, but it's when Will Smith looks at him and said, only you could make a shootout awkward. I thought that
how are your holes?
Yeah, how are your holes?
Oh, yeah. I thought that was great.
That was a great line.
But the first time Jacoby shoots somebody, and he kind of freezes and stares at him and goes, oh my God, I took somebody's life. And Will Smith has to get him on board. And that reminds me of a lot of the stuff we discussed when we talked about Fury. It's one of those really small moments that I thought was super impactful. And I think David Ayer's really good at those small moments that I
maybe
think
he's
get
good at
overlooked a lot.
maybe he's good at tight spaces because, and I guess most of that's probably more in the writing, but the scenes I loved in Fury were when they were in the tank and bantering back and forth, and the way that those were shot or the way that those were acted. And so maybe that's something that he's just really good at.
Yeah, well, that scene reminds me of when in Fury when War Daddy, after they lost their one of the guys on their tank, and he walks away from all the guys and kind of loses it for a minute. It's different scenario, but that's what it reminded me of. The first time you shoot somebody, if you're ever in that scenario, I mean that's an impact. He's never going to forget that for the rest of his life. And I like that it was an orc, and I totally was like, I get that. I get what you would be feeling in that moment. I thought that was really impactful, and I really liked that scene.
Yeah, for sure. Brian, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was gonna say it's kind of like End of Watch. Like he's really good with those like really kind of like how you said tight scenes, and like the two cops together. Like you could tell that he learned a lot in End of Watch that he used here in Bright.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Talk about things that didn't work for us. I've already mentioned it. The super, and this is a lot of I think what the critical response to this film was. They were really down on this as well because it really beats you over the head with some sort of weird race politics and trying to, I guess, make the orcs look like Hispanic people, whereas the aren't. Well, I don't know. Maybe orcs are black people, and the Hispanic gang is there. Like it's just too much. Like to me, it was just like trying. Like I'm a pretty open, pretty liberal guy. But it's one of those where towards the beginning of the film, it was just trying to knock it over the head too much for me. And it didn't continue that through the movie. It kind of, those lines got blurred as we went along, and that they sort of dropped that. But just certain situations that they put themselves in, driving through the elf town, and they're the elites, and we can't even go through this side of town as cops because we're lower than them. That just bugged me because I don't know the hierarchy. I don't know the system that they have because they didn't give me any information, and they're just making these like outlandish, right in your face comments on a current day situation. In my mind, I don't think it worked very well. But how do you guys feel about that, or were there other areas of the movie that just didn't quite work for you? And we'll go to Jay first.
I agree with you for the most part. I actually kind of like that the elves were the elitist race, just because it seems very in line with a lot of fantasy. But I did not like, orcs just kind of being this general representation of, every targeted minority group in the United States, like all crammed into one. So I agree that was really, really heavy-handed. But the thing I kind of had the issue with, which is probably a little silly, is I really loved this idea of the fantasy world moving into modern times. I just wish they wouldn't have used a real city, like LA. Like to me, it's like, wait, so everything's still developed. I just start overthinking it. Everything's still developed the same in the United States, where we have a major city called Los Angeles, even though we had orcs in it. You know what I'm saying? I wish they would have just made up city names and had it been its own separate world, just because
they made
I'm
some
intrigued by this
reference to
world.
some event too, and I can't remember what it was, but it was a real life event.
The Alamo.
The Alamo, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And all that stuff seemed, most people are probably just going to look past it. But I was so intrigued by this world, and I'm like, oh, I want to know more about it. Then I hear that, I'm like, well, this world seems weird. How does that work? How does this work? And like I said, my mind went, this would be a great TV show. And I think that stuff would deter the story building or world building if they did that in that type of
Well,
format.
of course, the Alamo, Daniel Ork and Davy Elfpants saved the Alamo. So, Brian, what do you think about what's going on?
I kind of agree. The heavy-handed nature of the race relations was, at least it was short. Like it was mostly just kind of the beginning, and then they kind of moved on from it. So I appreciated that much at least. But honestly, my biggest thing was I felt like they had the need to over-explain things that were easy to understand and not explain all things that were kind of difficult to understand. Because they have their own like they have their own like language with like I don't remember the freaking words now. Like the people who worship the Dark One, and then whether or not they're a bright, but they also have another word for being a magic user, and like they have these really like, almost convoluted systems. But you really understand what it means to be blooded. It's like, no, I got that one. It means that you're respected. Can you tell me about the other stuff? No? Oh, okay. I guess I'll try to make it work.
For sure. Well, let's go ahead and start moving into wrapping this discussion up. And I want you to rate this for me out of 10, because we keep saying it's one of those that is an enjoyable film, but not necessarily one that is going to sweep us away. It's not one of my best of 2017 by any means. But where would you rate this film, kind of on whatever scale you want? Let's just go ahead with a 10 scale, and we'll go with Bryan first.
I would go 6, I think. Like, I don't think... I was going to say 7, but 7 feels a little too nice. But it's like right there.
If Will Smith wasn't a dick, it would be a 7.
Maybe. It's just like, I really enjoyed it. I would definitely watch it again, but I don't think I'd seek it out to watch it again. Like if I walked into somebody like my buddy's house and like, hey, we're watching Bright, like, oh, okay, cool. But I don't think I'd be like, I'm bored tonight, I should watch Bright. So it was like I enjoyed my time with it, but I don't really have any need to go back to it. Yeah. I will go to a sequel, but I don't think I'll revisit the first one again.
Yeah, I get that. Jay, where you put this?
I'm probably there with you. I'll go 6.5, just a touch better. I agree with you. I enjoyed it. I think it is rewatchable, but like you said, nothing you'd seek out. But I'm a guy, I like background noise or something when I'm doing stuff in the house. It's definitely a movie I'd throw on, when doing chores and grab a seat for a couple minutes, see what's happening in the movie, get back to what I was doing. It's definitely like one of those just fun movies you could just put on and not have to think about. And you can just pop in and catch a scene you like and get back to what you're doing. So I'd put it 6.5.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably go ahead and give it a 7, because, well, I'm the guy that seems to love every movie, but also
except for Batman vs Superman,
because there are still garbage films out there. So what I like about this film is kind of not that it represents the future necessarily, but I do like the idea that Netflix is able to take some risks on things and doesn't have to worry so much about the box office. We're already talking about, I mean, Last Jedi is going to make a bajillion dollars, and we're talking about, like, is Disney worried about the response, so now they're going to change things? Like, you don't get that with something like a Netflix. Like, yeah, sure, the critics gave it a 28, 29 on Rotten Tomatoes when you gather them all together, but the audience is enjoying it. And so, I like the idea of that content being maybe a little bit more out there that couldn't have been sold to a major studio. And I like that's going that direction. I would say that I enjoyed this movie. Jay and I talked about another Netflix original. We talked about Sandcastle. Completely different film, but I enjoyed this movie over that. I would revisit this movie, I think, before I would go back and revisit Sandcastle. To tie into that, my last question to you all about this film is, do you want to see Bright 2, or what kind of iteration of that would you prefer to see? And maybe not written by Max Landis, as Bryan mentioned, there's some really harsh stuff coming out about Max Landis, much like many of the folks out there in Hollywood. But do you want to see any kind of sequel to this? We went to Bryan first the last time, so we'll go to Jay.
I definitely do. Like I said, I want to see more of this world. And I was reading some of the trivia on IMDb right before, and I don't know if I didn't verify it, but it said that there was a sequel approved through Netflix before they even posted this one. So I don't know if that's accurate, but I definitely want to return to this world and maybe delve into some of those things and get some explanations on some of the stuff they talked about, for sure.
Can we call it Brighter and then Brightest?
No.
No.
All right. Bryan, what about you?
The problem is like, I don't really like Max Landis as a person, but I don't know who could pick up this torch quite the way that he did.
Mhm.
Like, he's got a very unique writing style that not a lot of people out there have. It's got a really good sense of humor while also being very serious, and it can be whimsical and strange. And I'm worried about who they try to get to pick up for him if they don't give him the job again, which, given the way things are going, they probably won't. But that said, I would totally watch a sequel. Like, I really like these characters together. I really enjoy the world. I want to see, will the Dark One show up? You know, who will it be? Will it be Jude Law? I kind of want it to be Jude Law. But yeah, I thought it was a fun ride, and I would totally show up for a second one. I'll probably forget some stuff from the first one because I doubt I'll go back, but I would totally watch it again or watch the next one.
I put my money on Willem Dafoe. I feel like Willem Dafoe would be a great Dark Lord. Going to be soon to be Academy Award winner, Willem Dafoe, from what I hear. So thank you guys so much for being on and talking about this Netflix original movie with me and talking about it for the Front Row Movie Reviews. I'll go ahead and plug our show. You can find us at www.thefrontrowmoviereviews.com. We've got all different sorts of shows. This has been a full disclosure where we go into a newer type movie and spoil the hell out of it. I've got my Disney show, Beyond the Mouse, coming up in the January episode. We're going to be making contact with a new Disney podcast, the Disney Dads podcast, and talk to those guys about being in the parks and then also one of their favorite movies. And then we've got a lot of great things coming from Scott with flashbacks, from Brandon with classics, from Jeremy with his Are You Afraid of the podcast, the Are You Afraid of the Dark podcast, and then also with our Twilight Zone, the Zone-isode. So we've got a lot of different content that we put out all the time, and we appreciate you guys giving us feedback and telling us what you'd like to hear, because Jay posted this a couple days ago saying, hey, can we do a full disclosure on that? And I said, yeah, you're going to be on it. So you never know what's going to end up happening. Before I have these guys give us their wrap-ups and final thoughts, I want to say I love your hat, Bryan. I meant to mention it at the beginning, but Hamilton just debuted out in LA. You got to go see it, right?
I did, yeah. It was phenomenal, like everyone said.
Yeah. In Chicago, I was like, I went into my the show in Chicago, and I was like, you know, I've listened to this soundtrack probably 500,000 times. What could possibly happen that would wow me? And it was an incredible experience. I loved it.
Yep.
Every second of it.
I did not listen to the soundtrack at all. I purposely wanted to go in as fresh as I could, and everyone's like, "You won't understand." It's like, I listen to hip hop. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be okay, but you know. I was a little worried about it, but no, I went in and it was easily, like, it's up there in like my top 3 of all time. Like, one of the best shows I've ever seen.
Yeah, as you can tell, I don't listen to much hip hop, so I needed the primer. Jay, I like your hat too. You keep going with that VFW, and I'm sure we'll be bringing another episode from the Chatham VFW here for Memorial Day coming up in May. But I hope you come on for many more things beyond that. Actually, we talked about this. I would love to have this be like a February, March episode. Between John and Jay, our 2 veterans that are talking about all these war films. I want to talk Perks of Being a Wallflower with you, because I think that's kind of hilarious.
I love that movie.
Because you guys both love it, and so do I. So I think that would be a lot of fun. So, Bryan, any last thoughts?
No, not really. I think we kind of covered everything. I think it's a movie that people should see. But for everything about me, you should definitely check out After the Hype, athpod.com. And then you can find us pretty much everywhere else. The first movie in January we have coming up, I'm really excited about. Much like Bright, it has a huge divide, like right down the middle of people who love it and people think it's fucking garbage. And I'm on the love it side, so I'm sure I'll have some people on who hate it. But we're talking about Mother, and I am so excited to talk about Mother because there is just so much to unpack in that movie.
Nice.
So look forward to that. Thing should be coming out 2 weeks from yesterday.
If you listen to us at all, then do yourself a favor and listen to the better version of us, which is After the Hype. So go listen to that for sure.
Good
plug. Jay, any final thoughts?
No, I think we pretty well covered it. I'll just throw out there, anybody out there, just you see your local VFW or if there's a team red, white, and blue out there in the area, just make sure you're trying to support them as they do their best to help our veterans.
For sure. Well, thank you guys very much. And for the Front Row Movie Reviews, I am Craig McFarland.
I'm Jay. Hoffman.
I'm Bryan Dressel.
We will see you in the front row wearing some elf ears.